Hello everyone, and welcome to Charged. Charged is an exciting collection of multimedia resources for the African and international creative economy. It is curated and produced by HEVA, Africa's first dedicated creative economy finance, business support, and knowledge facility. We, the HEVA team, are thrilled to welcome you into a space where you will enjoy learning and engaging directly about the creative and cultural space. Charged will feature input from our wide community of creatives, business owners, investors, policymakers, and others. We are certain that you will pick up on something to help you along your creative business's journey, wherever you may be. This project is enabled by the Innovative Financing Initiative for Culture, IFIC, and we are grateful for the support of our sponsors, the EU Commission and the French Development Agency, AFD. The resources of Charged include audio and video interviews, short clips, articles, and more. We're super happy to welcome you to one today. Do let us know what you think on our social media channels using the hashtag Charged. We are at HEVA Fund on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For now, sit back and enjoy. Kendi, it's really wonderful to be able to have you here to do this podcast series. This particular one is called Show Me the Money, because we are really interested in getting into the details, getting very, very granular about how exactly does money move among creatives towards creative businesses, from money people to creative businesses, within the creative business, all of that. And we were really interested in talking to you because you teach entrepreneurs about money, but then it would be great to hear from you, from in your own words. You can tell us your full name and what exactly you do and how you came to start teaching entrepreneurs about money.
Thank you so much, Dr. Njoki, for having me. Like you mentioned, my name is Kendi Kamwambia. I'm in charge of supporting compliance at HEVA Fund, and that's how I started interacting with creative businesses, and using my background in finance and accounting. I've been able to sort of understand creative businesses in both like the academic way, and also get to see the nuances and the granulars of where for the creative businesses it's a bit different, or you need to tweak or look at things in a certain different way. Because, for instance, when it comes to, let's say, collateral, if you're giving loans to creative businesses, most of them are young entrepreneurs, and so they probably don't have assets. And that's where, as people who've come from the finance school and the business school, we need to sort of understand where these people are coming from and the best way to support them to access these loans even without collateral. So, in a nutshell, from my background in finance and accounting, and from starting my work at HEVA as a supporting compliance officer, I've been able to sort of gain an understanding around the creative businesses, and also use like my finance background to relate to them, and find innovative and efficient ways to both loan to creatives, and also to support them in their financial journey and the entrepreneurial journey.
It's really interesting how you said that there's coming from one sector and coming completely into another, and it reminds me of the journey that HEVA has had in teaching a lot of people who have a much more kind of pure financial background how to understand the financial sector, and especially with regard to ideas like risk, where this sector is viewed as traditionally very risky. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Why is this sector viewed as so risky? And what have you done as yourself, as somebody who came from a background that would consider this sector a risky one, to start enabling yourself to be more open to investing in a sector like this one?
Okay, so the first thing, creative products, if we're talking about fashion designers or musicians, or maybe crafts and handmade items, people who make these things sell them to people as a luxury item. It's not as basic as food.
So like not like going to the hospital, not like paying school fees. Okay.
So it's not a very immediate need for most people. People buy these products and these services when they have extra money in their bank accounts. And so just by that nature, then this sector becomes a very volatile sector, where if the economy isn't doing as well, if there's any hitch in the economy, such as an election or a pandemic like the one that we're in right now, then their goods are not going to be the most fast moving, and they are at a more risk of business failure. And so that's one of the reasons why banks and financials view this industry as being risky. Also, it's a bit nascent in this country. Parents tell their kids to go learn medicine, learn architecture, learn like careers that have been there,
like finance and accounting.
Yeah. And so the same people who are our parents are the ones who have set these notions in the banking sector, in the financing sector. They're the same people who hold the power and hold the policy making and decision making power. And so for them, creative sector isn't a priority, and so then they will deem them as important to make policies that allow them to thrive and like allow them some threshold. Yeah. So for instance, when it comes to HEVA fund, when we are loaning a creative business, we go with the seasonality of a business. If it's a wedding business, you know that there are some certain seasons that are good for business, for wedding business. And so such people will model their finance model to correspond to this seasonality. And so you'll only require them to pay when the season is high, and when the season is low, they don't really need to repay. They sort of get a moratorium. And so in a nutshell, the reason why creative businesses are considered risky is because the people who have been formulating policies in the past in both the financing industry and in the and in government and policy making industry haven't really prioritized this industry. It's a bit nascent in our country, and also that the products and the services offered are only consumed by consumers after they've paid for their basic needs. And so if there's any shock, this is the first industry to suffer the shock. So that in a financial's eyes is quite risky. Yeah, and they would require collateral. And these young entrepreneurs, also the sector carries a lot of women. We know they are adversely affected when it comes to having collateral. They haven't quite accumulated as much.
Yeah. And then so now for you as a financier who is trained to see in sectors in that sort of way, with this one is hyper risky for these reasons, etc., how did you begin to start turning around your own views of the creative sector?
First is to understand these businesses and these entrepreneurs. These are passionate people, passionate in their art. If it's a musician, they're really passionate about making music. A fashion designer is really passionate about making beautiful dresses for people, and they just want to make a living out of these passions, as they should. And in other industries, we've seen how passions have paid off greatly. Sort of in Hollywood, I think they're among the most highly paid people. The creative sector are among the most paid people. And so for me, coming from a finance background, I had to sort of unlearn risk. Because the first instance of when you see a fashion business that has a lot of seasonality, prices their goods quite high end and only like cater to the luxury market, the first thing is belts go off. This is not a the Kenyan market that these people will be able to access is quite small. It's a fraction of the market. And so if you're thinking about loaning them, you're really coming with bricks. You're skeptical about their viability in the market. But from just educating yourself in what other countries have done, what the creative sector has been able to accomplish in other countries, and what that trajectory has been, that once this business is supported by being given even patient capital, where there's like zero repayment for several years, you can give them like a convertible debt for over 5 years, so that then they sit with that capital, keep reinvesting it in their business cycle, reinvest it over the years, then they're able to overcome the loss-making years and be self-sufficient maybe by year 5, or at least start turning in positive cash flows by year 5. And so it's been a lot of unlearning and just putting the caution at the back of your head. Yes, it's there, but also how do we mitigate this risk? Because yes, it is risky when you're selling high-end products to a market that maybe only 1% of the market, actually, or less than 1% of the market can access that. It's very high risk. But then what can we as financiers do to sort of allow you a more patient take off time in your business as you look to sort of capture the entire small market, if it's the entire 1%? How can we support you best to have all the time you need with capital, and to have the most efficient capital where you're able to source for products cheaply, or maybe source in bulk, and so you're enjoying some economies of scale. And so yes, it's been for us to figure out how to best support you. Yes, this is your market. It's risky. It has all these volatilities. It sounds bells at the beginning, but it's for us to work around mitigating those risks.
There's something really interesting you've said about loss-making years, and is this typical of all businesses, especially when they're beginning, that it's almost inevitable that you'll make a loss? Is making a profit a given, or should most businesses prepare to kind of during their learning period? Should they just kind of prepare to not necessarily make a profit as they learn?
Yeah, so for most businesses, I don't know what business you can start in year 1. It's taken off. Yeah, it's taken off and you're already like at a break even and profit making at that time. That has to be a very out of the box kind of business. But for most businesses, yes, you must prepare for losses, at least in the initial years, because these are the years you're trying to accumulate, or rather determine what assets you need in order for you to operate at a certain revenue, to acquire certain revenue. So there's so much investment, so much sunk capital that you're going to be inputting in most businesses, especially those that are capital intensive, like you require a lot of equipment, and so you do need to take into account that there will be some years that you might make losses, and just put in mitigation strategies around that. So for instance, even when it comes to like fintech companies and IT companies, there's a lot of research and development that's going on in the initial years, and so those are ideally loss-making years because there's no revenue that's coming in. And so for you have for an entrepreneur that's in such a business, you have to have significant backing in your capital to be able to sustain you during the loss-making years. And if your initial capital wasn't as sufficient at the beginning, then you need to analyze what your cash need is. Project for the next 5 years what your cash need will be. I'm going to make losses of, let's say, $100 every year for the next 5 years. My capital is only $200. So you already have a deficit of $300. So how am I going to raise
that $300
in these 5 years? So you start putting in strategies to talk to financiers, to bootstrap with your family, convince them to loan some money to you.
Hey, that's intense. I don't think I'd realized quite how difficult it can be for entrepreneurs, especially in those early years when everything is still figuring itself out. And that it can be a very, very stressful thing for them.
And I think also one of the reasons why businesses fail in the early stage is that you have capital. Let's say you've been saving some money. You're like, I'm good with this $100,000. I'm going into business. That time you haven't put in place, you haven't projected what your cash need
are going to be
in the next 5 years. So you just buy your assets, you buy, you acquire stuff, you pay for your first year of operations, you make tremendous losses, or maybe 50,000.
Oh my God.
USD. And so what you don't realize is that your capital has halved at that point. So if you're not able to source for capital in the next year to sort of also cushion you if you make a loss that year, and so that if in year 3 you start being profitable, turning in positive cash flows, turning in a positive profit, then you start to recover and you start to rebuild your capital back to its initial point, and also to above the initial point. Then you start having retained earnings that you can reinvest in your business and keep growing the business.
And so this is actually making me realize that in many ways, and even though I've worked with you, Kendi, for years, you still teach me things every day.
Yeah.
And this thing that you've said has actually made me realize that, so let's say here I am Njoki, I want to start a fashion business, and I have $100,000. God give me $100,000 in life for things. But anyway, so I want to start a fashion business. I have $100,000. And I feel like now I can dive into starting the business. And it actually has made me realize that you need to do a projection even before you start the business, because you can start a business with capital, but then the capital you have is not the capital for the business you want to start.
Exactly.
So you might actually need more money before, or you might need to scale down your idea of what starting a business is going to be.
Exactly.
Instead of just kind of jumping in and saying it'll figure itself out. Because sometimes it can, and you might be lucky, but it should be luck.
It will be luck.
It wouldn't be anything else.
Yeah. Because let's say, for instance, the same example that you've given.
Yeah.
You have 100,000 USD. You want to jump into a fashion business.
Yeah.
And initially you go and buy assets.
Yeah.
Equipment.
Yeah.
Worth 70,000 USD.
Yes.
Because that's what you need to turn the quality
of the garments that I want to make.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you make a loss, or if you just incur operational costs of $30 $30,000, then your capital at that point
it's actually gone.
Yeah,
we're now at zero.
And so the next year, if you still need to pay your landlord, if you still need to do some marketing and branding for your clothes to sell, then you have to source for additional capital. It could be in form of debt. It could be you digging back to your personal savings, and then by having a projection. But if you had started with an initial projection and projected the next 3 years what the cash need would be, you would probably make more smarter decisions than where you'd probably say, I don't need to own my own assets, I can list them. I don't need to produce myself, I can look for a manufacturer who'll produce for me, and so I cut off the asset cost
at that point in time.
Exactly. And so you still retain your capital.
So you can incur an asset cost later on in the business when the business is a little bit more robust.
Exactly. Yeah. So by just knowing what your business will need, projecting what your cash need and your funding need would be, you're able to put in smart strategies in your business. You're able to say, no, I will not buy assets, I'll go and look for a manufacturer. I'll not do this much intensive marketing in year 1, I'll do my marketing in year 2. Just by analyzing what your cash need is and the cash that you have at hand. Or probably, I need to buy all this asset, I need to do all this marketing, so I need to find a partner who will loan me an additional X amount of money. Exactly.
Okay. Maybe another thing would be to talk about, and you are very clear about what the loss making years are, but also to talk about the how to value the non-financial things that an entrepreneur puts into the business, especially at the beginning. So let's say if we go back to the example where I'm Njoki with my $100,000 and I want to start my fashion business, and then I make the decision, for instance, that the bulk of heavy marketing, where I'm doing kind of brand visibility and whatever to the general public, I won't do in the first year. But what I will do is move around my relatives, my friends, and convince them to buy something from me, because that is still marketing. Yes. So now I should value that.
Yes,
and talk about that when I'm thinking about the value of what is going into the business. And I should even have an Excel sheet where the cost of that marketing is going. Yeah.
I mean, as an entrepreneur, it's good to cost your time, the time that you spend in your business. So say and then how I advise entrepreneurs is that just picture or just imagine that you're working a full-time job in a different sector. How much would you be paid? That's your opportunity cost initially in the when you're starting the business. So say you were a doctor previously, the government would pay you an X amount of money.
Yeah.
So that's your opportunity cost. That's what you've lost by going into entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And you need to cost it in your business. You don't have to take it out, because for every entrepreneur who starts a business, at the beginning you're bootstrapping. So you don't have to take the entire X amount.
Yeah.
Entire X salary amount from your business, but just be aware of it, accumulate it, cost it in your profit and loss, so that then at the point where either you get an investor or the business picks up, you're aware of what your business owes you. You're aware of what your business owes you. So for instance, if you cost it as an expense, you'll charge, maybe let me call it entrepreneurial fees.
Yes.
Because then that's your pay to do everything that surrounds entrepreneurship around
and that you can even break it down. You can say this is for marketing,
accounting,
this is for accounting, this is for whatever it may be.
Exactly. But those are all the duties assigned to you by your business, or you assign yourself for your business.
Yes.
And so you've costed it at an X amount, so you charge that for that year, an X amount. And so if you made a loss, if it makes you make a loss, then you take that loss to the balance sheet. And so it will be carried over the years as a liability in your books of accounts. And so probably at the point where you start making profits, you're able to start repaying this liability, paying yourself from the business,
from the business gains.
Yes. And reducing this liability that's owed to you by your own company.
And because you are charting it, you know exactly how much it is. So you won't first of all feel cheated.
Exactly.
When the business starts making money but it can't pay you. Because you'd already planned for that eventuality.
Yes. And even at a point where you get a partner who's willing to invest in your business and come on board, either as an equity or a debt partner, especially if it's an equity partner, then you're able to charge them your initial work, because then you're going to cost that valuation. You're going to value.
And because you are costing it this whole time.
Exactly.
Because you are not working for the business for free at any given point in time.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yes.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs actually feel like they're doing free work. And then that also definitely contributes to the fatigue, the burnout, the stress,
which is terrible.
It is. When we think about creative businesses and cultural businesses in East Africa, where can they get external financing for their business, like the one that didn't come from your own pocket?
So for this, I'd say there are two factors to consider. One is the stage at which your business is. Are you an early stage? Are you a medium-sized stage business? Or are you in the growth phase of your business? All these three stages have three different, or rather, depending on where you are in your stage, in your business cycle, let's say, you'll be able to access different types of financing. And I'll come back to that. The second thing that you need to consider is alignment, that the people who you go to for money are aligned with your purpose. So let's take an example of an early stage business. For early stage, we probably don't have financials dating back. It's just that you want to start this business right now, and this is the amount of capital you either have from your own personal savings. So your personal savings can be a source of financing. Either you've borrowed from family and friends, or you are in a circle that was then able to loan you some certain amount of money, or your own personal banker has been seeing the financial history of your account, and they feel comfortable loaning you some amount of money. So if you're in early stage, for sure it's going to be about bootstrapping, but the advice that I'd give you is always have financial history. Maintain your financial history, maintain a paper trail at every point in your business. If you're buying anything, if you're selling anything, ensure there's a paper trail of how the money came in and how the money went out. So that would be ensure you're not receiving cash when you're selling your items, and ensure you're not paying cash. You're not paying cash out to suppliers. You're paying either through a bank or a mobile app, a way that you can be able to track your statements.
So people wouldn't necessarily accept receipts and things like that?
Receipts are good if you're able to give receipts, but then for most entrepreneurs, if you're on the go, it might be hard to
always be issuing a receipt. Okay.
But if you ensure that there's money came in through a traceable way, either a mobile money through mobile money or bank, then you're able to retrieve the statement and say, this inflow was a sale, this outflow I was buying maybe a raw material, or I was paying for staff salaries or something like that. So you're able to reconstruct your income statement from a traceable statement. And then if you're a medium-sized company, or as well, you can use your own personal savings. If you've been in business for a bit and you have retained earnings, you've been making profits that you haven't taken out of the business, you haven't paid yourself dividends, those retained earnings can be plowed back to the business and be a source of financing for you. You can always approach your business banker, who's able to then use your historical information to determine what amount of loan they can give you. Also, private equity funds are an option for you if they feel that your business is scalable. Venture capitalists as well, angel investors. Also, there are government stimuluses that the government puts in place, either to fund the youth or fund women, but they would require you to be in a sort of an association. So maybe a group of youth come together, identify as a chama, and then they access these funds and keep revolving the funds within themselves. So all these are available options to you, but the thing to note is to be aligned. So for instance, when it comes to venture capitalists and private equity and private funds, certain venture capitalists are focused on different sectors. There are those focused on agriculture, there are those focused on IT, and so it's for you to know which sector, which venture capitalist aligns most to your sector, and then approach those. Always be in their networks, subscribe to their newsletters, and just to be aware of when they are looking to finance businesses, and you can make your application. And then for the growth stage businesses, these ones are unlimited in terms of where they can get their finances, because they've had historical information, they've gone to market, they've moved from early stage to medium size to growth, so they've proven themselves at the market level. And so bankers will be willing to support such businesses. Development fund institutions will be also open, private equity, venture capitalists, just to name a few. So for them, their options are a bit unlimited. Yeah. But then that's also because for whatever reason, they've been lucky enough to still be standing and to somehow be making a profit. Exactly. And at this point, they also have collateral. They've accumulated some capital base. And so they're quite a force to reckon with when it comes to the financials. Okay. Yeah. You've already talked about as a way of getting on top of your numbers, making sure that you're not moving cash, but that money is moving in traceable ways. What other tips can you give creative entrepreneurs with regard to keeping on top of their numbers as a way of getting eventually to a point where you can ask somebody for external investment? Yeah. I know I've talked to some creative entrepreneurs, and they've said, why do you require me to learn numbers and learn accounting? I'm a creative entrepreneur. I just want to make beautiful things. I just want to make beautiful garments, just make work of arts. Why must I learn about accounting? No one asks a doctor to learn about taxes. Why are you forcing me into this? And to be fair, I mean, because it's a really interesting question that you've put, because even though I'm not practicing anymore, doctors are taught how to doctor, but they're not taught how to open a doctor's office and how to make that office a successful one. So people just assume that you'll be able to run an office, but then a doctor's office requires admin, a doctor's office requires accounts. A doctor's office, and so in a sense, even doctors do have to know those things, even though it looks like they spend most of their time wearing a white coat and talking to people. Somebody's still going to come to them at the end of the day and say, this month we didn't make enough to meet our rent, or our patients are complaining that our waiting room is too small. We're going to have to figure out moving to a place where the place has more air, or 2 people fainted while they were waiting because the airflow isn't great, or wameanza, they've started
a construction outside.
Yeah.
So everybody comes in with allergies, and we are actually an allergy office. So now we're gonna have to move.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you say that nobody asks a doctor, it's not true. They do have to figure it out if they're selling services.
The difference, yes. The difference, and my answer is always, well, when you decide to go into entrepreneurship, regardless of whether you're a creative entrepreneur, a doctor who's an entrepreneur, because that's a doctor who's an entrepreneur.
That is one,
The requirement for being an entrepreneurship is that you have to stay on top of your numbers.
And that if you're selling the thing yourself, you have to stay on top of the numbers. If you are employed, somebody else is staying on top of the numbers on the collective behalf.
Exactly.
But you, ukiamua, like the day you decide, I'm going to start selling water bottles, the numbers for those water bottles will follow you.
Yeah. And so that's the difference. You decided to be a creative entrepreneur. So it's good that you want to make beautiful dresses, but you're an entrepreneur, and this is a requirement of entrepreneurship.
That you know your numbers.
Exactly. So over and on top of staying on top of your numbers, where you're making sure that money is flowing in and out through traceable ways, is that you need capacity.
Yeah.
It's unfair that we're asking you to get this capacity yourself, like learn how to trace what income came in a certain month, what outflows went in a certain month. But if you can't do it yourself, then seek capacity through someone who is trained to do this thing, and you can come to agreeable terms. So you don't have to have an accountant sit at your office all Monday day to Friday, 8 to 5, and then you have to compensate them like really huge amounts of money. You can have a contract that allows you to sort of outsource this capacity, this accounting capacity and accounting support from either firms that offer accounting support, or maybe from just an accountant that you know who's your friend and they know their numbers and they can do this as a side hustle. They can be able to sort of construct for you your statements every month from your bank statement and your mobile statement. So as long as you make sure that your money came in through traceable ways, give them to this accountant that you know who you've had an agreement on how you're going to pay each other and what the working terms are, and you make them really favorable and not too costly on yourself, and also still agreeable to the other party, then they're able to construct for you financial information just from having traceable documents. If you're able to give invoices every time someone buys for you, the better, because then the accountant can be able to trace that this invoice relates to this particular inflow in the bank statement, or this invoice relates to this particular inflow in my bank, in my mobile banking, in the mobile banking statement. And if you're buying anything, if you're paying employees, have a contract and have like a payment voucher that goes on a monthly basis, that this is my payment to employee X for this and this. And so then the accountant will be able to trace the outflows as well from the supporting documents that you give. But if you're not able to do supporting documents, the bare minimum you can do is ensure that money goes in and out through traceable ways. Then a qualified accountant will be able to augment and say these ones belong to the income statement. Had you bought an asset, they're able to reconstruct your assets in the balance sheet. If you received invoices that you didn't pay from your supplier, they're able to say that this is a liability to you, this is a payable, and they mark it in the balance sheet. So yeah, just ensure money comes in and out through traceable ways, and also maintain any invoice that you get from your supplier. And if you're able to issue invoices to your customers, the better. Yeah.
And I think maybe another thing for people to remember is that your accountant is on your side. They're not coming to police you. So if there's a gap in the balance sheet, then it's the two of you who will figure out together. And then you might remember, oh my gosh, when I was in such and such a place, somebody did X and Y and Z, and then they gave me 25,000 shillings.
Yeah.
And I logged it in my head, but then I didn't write it down.
Yeah.
Then now when your accountant comes and says, so now we have a gap of 35,000 shillings, and then you're like, oh, there's that 25 that was X and Y and Z. And so in a sense, they're also kind of teaching you to have better financial habits.
Exactly. And then they let you know where your money is, because sometimes your money can be tied into a debtor. So if they say, okay, according to this balance sheet, it's not balancing because you're supposed to be having 100,000 in your bank, but you have 20. So where is the rest of the money according to the profit that you made? Then you're able to say, actually, so and so didn't give me money. They are my debtor. They owe me 20,000. You're able to say, I owe this certain supplier 50,000 because I haven't paid out their invoice yet. I'm holding their goods, but I haven't paid it yet. And so they're able to balance between the profit that's reported in the income statement and the money that you have in your account. They're able to balance and see, what do you owe? Who do you owe? How much do you owe them? Who owes you? And how much do they owe you? Okay. Yeah.
Kendi, when you look back at your interactions with creative and cultural businesses over the past years, what has been really fascinating for you to learn about the ways in which these small business owners handle money within their businesses? What are the most common good things? What are the most common places where people meet challenges?
So I think the first place is when they fail to separate. The main challenge is they fail to separate themselves from the business. You and your business are two different entities. So you can't not pay yourself, or at least track how much the business owes you, and then keep dipping into all the sales. If you make a sale and you have an urgent personal need, you just keep dipping into the business account.
Yeah.
Or maybe even your account and the business account are the same. That lack of separation really creates a mess, because then you're just taking money out of the business, or the business is taking money from you, and no one is accountable to, like, between you and your business, you're not being accountable. And so at the end of the day, you don't know the true valuation of your business. You don't know the true profit status of your business, because you're loaning each other money.
You and the business are loaning one another money.
Yeah.
Where?
And so you don't know where do we stand. We have a positive cash flow or not. And so if in case you're not making money and the business keeps taking money from you, you're still rotating, you're still moving your product, your doors are still open, but the money is coming out of you, and you're not able to tell whether you're making profits or you're making losses. And eventually, once the cash flow runs out from you, there's going to be a deadlock where the business can't keep going. And so that lack of separation hinders visibility. When it comes to the business, you don't know exactly what the business performance was. And even if you're able to get an accountant to sort of separate and tell you actually owe your business 500,000,
it won't make any sense to you.
It won't make any sense to you
because you remember all the times when you were dipping into your pocket to nini the business and how painful that was for you.
Exactly.
So now hearing that actually you are the one who is in debt to the business is crazy.
Yeah. And so that's one of the mistakes. And also it brings a lot of compliance issues, because there are tax issues involved where you're getting money from your business, it's not being taxed.
Because when it's leaving the business, it should be taxed.
It should be taxed.
Wow.
And so you've not declared that, and so that lack of separation is really a hindrance to good business practice. The other thing is lack of capacity. So you are not aware of what your numbers are, and you haven't involved an accountant or maybe an additional accounting, let's say support, just accounting software support to sort of just track these things. And so you're really working in oblivion to what is the actual business performance.
Right.
Yeah. And then the other thing is non-compliance. So from the beginning, you're not paying attention to your taxes, you're not tracking anything, you're not registering for your business licenses. And so at the point where you're coming to, maybe if you have to seek financing, you're not formalized enough for someone to trust you with their money. And so that's another pitfall.
And that's interesting, because also now if you're not trustworthy with regard to legal things that you're supposed to be doing, it'll be very difficult for somebody with money to be able to trust you 1,000%.
Exactly. And then also the people who are financing you, they have an obligation to the government to finance a credible business. But here is a business that's a bit dodgy.
Otherwise they'll be looked at like they're doing money laundering.
Exactly. And so you'll miss out on an opportunity and on a financing opportunity if you're not well formalized and well structured.
Or at least you're showing a sign of being able to go in that general direction.
Exactly.
Okay.
And sometimes it's because of lack of capacity, but there are ways to acquire that capacity without straining your resources.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you, and we've talked about capital needs and cash needs and projections. So how do you think businesses, and even when you're like a tiny little business, like let's say if even if we even come back to Njoki and the 100,000, that's relatively large. There are people who start a business with far less money. So like, let's say I'm Njoki, I want to start selling bookmarks and I have 10,000 shillings, right? So now, how do I assess what my needs in this business are going to be year on year?
Okay, so you start with, what do you require to make these bookmarks? What equipment do you require? That becomes your capital expenditure. And then you assess, what operational costs do you need? Are you going to be distributing these bookmarks yourself? So do you need to project what your transport costs will be? Will you have a shop? What's the rent going to be? Do you need a courier to deliver these things? So you break down your needs in terms of capital expenditure and operational expenses, and then you're able to see what is the bare minimum amount of capital, or rather, how much capital do you need? Yes, in year one. Say you want to increase production in year two. You're only producing 100. You want to go to 200, so you need an additional equipment. So in year two, again, you list what your capital expenditure is and what your operational expenditure will be. Here, it's good to note that when it comes to operational expenditure, you need to grow. You need to adjust for inflation. So you need to give a growth rate for what you expect your operational
costs to have grown by.
And by operational, I mean also the cost of production for your bookmarks. So like the raw materials, as well as the other operational cost, as well as capital expenditure. So you'll be able to see, in the next 3 years, I need capital worth this much. So say you have half of that amount, then you know you have a deficit already in year two. And so you start putting into place measures of how you can raise this capital. And raising capital doesn't have to be approaching a financier. If in your business probably you have machines that you don't use, you can sell these machines and have that be an inflow into the business. You can ask someone. That's when it comes not to financing. You can ask a financier, your bank, a family member, to put in some capital. So there are various ways to mitigate that cash need. Or you can put off buying the second machine to a different year when the cash flows are much better.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then, like, I think maybe one of the really interesting points that you've raised is that a lot of people will say, let's just start this business and then we'll see.
Yeah.
Right. But then being able to do the projections is also, it's kind of like a very grounding thing. It's like, I'm really taking this thing and myself seriously. So if I took it as seriously as I can, then I'm able to see, okay, what will this look like next year? What will this look like this other year? So it's not like going on a first date.
Yeah.
You know, it's like making a decision about what is this relationship going to look like?
Yes.
And what am I putting in so that it looks like that?
Exactly. So with projections, you're able to see, regardless of the profit situation, even if you don't make profits, you're able to see what's your runway like with the capital that you have, or what additional capital do you need to have your runway be sufficient enough for you to take off. Because most businesses die on the runway.
Wow.
Where the capital is insufficient and you're hemorrhaging money because you're making losses.
And it's because what you started was the business in your head, not the business that your capital allowed you to start.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And also you didn't go looking for the additional cash need.
I see.
Yeah.
Because you didn't realize you had an additional cash need because you didn't quantify it.
Exactly. Or maybe you even realized, but you didn't put it in strategies, because there are ways, even if no one is willing to loan you money, there are ways to sort of look within you and see which assets you can retire or which business expenses you can forego to just maintain a lean team that doesn't run you into losses. And so you're not hemorrhaging your capital.
What have you learned from creative businesses that has made you a better business advisor?
I've learned that no one is born with this information. The lucky ones, like ourselves, we go to business school and we get this information. But if someone went to a different, learned something else in school, and so they don't have the business skill.
Yeah.
It's important that they acquire it, or they get someone on board on their team who has this skill, because it's an important skill, and some businesses might actually fail, not because they were not sustainable in the beginning, not because they didn't have potential, but because of some minor issues such as cash flow issues
that are avoidable.
And so if you're able to at the beginning just have a good team, they don't have to be on permanent basis. You can either give them part-time contracts or like a gig contract where you just get an accountant and sit them down and just analyze their brain, or rather just get some insights from them. Then this will be really helpful for your business. The other thing is governance, where you're not separating yourself from the business. You need to be a separate entity from your business and ensure there's good governance in your business. One way to do that is having a board. Your board can be family members who you just know that at the end of the year you need to report to these people.
Like you need somebody to report to.
Accountability. Yes. To just tell them, this is the money I made or this is the money I lost. And then they'll ask you, what's the plan? Or I paid myself this much. Why did you pay yourself this much? Yet the going market rate is this. Why did you pay yourself? Let's say, or why did you take money from the business when you should have just paid yourself this much? Why did you take extra because you had an emergency? And so just someone that you're accountable to can be very helpful to ensure that you're governing your business well and also have capacity when it comes to business skills.
And that no matter how I don't need to wait for my business to become like a massive business before I get a board. It can be small.
Yes. And it can be family members you don't have, who maybe will do it for free. Or friends.
And I think maybe the thing that's interesting there is that sometimes people will go to, like, a lot of business owners already talk to their friends and family members about their business. It's just that they don't do it formally.
Exactly.
Like they've not really kind of cemented the arrangement.
Yeah.
So I just come to you and then I vent about my bookmarks and about how this bookseller had assured me X and Y and Z, and then now they're not going to do it. But then I can actually be telling you this in a context where you are more aware that you're not just supposed to tell me I'm so sorry, but I can have suggestions that can help you.
Exactly. And have visibility of the numbers as well.
Yeah.
So was it a profit making year or a loss making year? If it was a loss making year, what do we do to turn around? Or how much runway do we have? Or what do we need to start doing to ensure this business survives? Yeah.
Okay. Are there any money hacks that you'd like to share with small businesses?
My advice would be profitability is important, but ultimately cash flow is more important.
Cash flow is king. And you've said this before.
Yeah. Cash flow is king because you can make losses for 3 years, but as long as you have a good supporting capital base, you are able to surmount the losses and maybe recover in year 4.
So let's do an example of this supportive capital base. So like here is me with my 10,000 shillings and I started my bookmark business. What does a supportive capital base look like for me?
So let's say you started with 10,000. Yeah. And your total operational cost, or rather your total net profit or loss is a negative. So you lost 3,000.
Yes.
Each year.
Yeah.
For the next 3 years. So you see your capital has been wiped out and you're only remaining with 1,000.
Yes.
So in year 4, if you're able to source for capital an additional 10, and then that becomes the year that you get a really big order, or maybe you put in some breakthrough strategies into your business and you're able to make profits at that time.
Yeah.
That if you make profits of 3,000 in year 4.
Yes.
And you'd borrowed capital of 10,000.
Yes.
You had a remaining capital of 1,000.
Yes.
Already you can see that your capital base has increased to 14,000. And so you start your recovery process to a point where either you recover and maintain your capital, either your capital, if you operate at the same place, but if you keep plowing back your retained earnings, that capital base is just going to keep growing.
Yeah.
So year on year, if you make 3,000, you keep growing that capital base. You surpass even the initial capital that you started with. Yeah.
Okay. So people shouldn't worry so much about, did I make a profit this year?
Yeah.
But the time when cash needed to move, did I have it? Was I able to move it in good time?
Exactly.
Did I maintain my good business relationships?
Yes.
When cash needed to come to me, did it come back in good time?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because without, we say lack of profitability you can fail in 3 years, but lack of cash flows, you fail today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Lack of cash flow, you can fail today.
Yeah.
Okay.
You close your doors today.
Wow.
Because the landlord will be like, hey, my rent.
Your cash flow.
Yeah.
And that actually, if you look at even the ways in which profit is defined, you like, there's your gross revenues, which you made, like all of the money that came in as a result of you selling your product. But then you have to deduct your rent, you have to deduct paying your people. So if a business is able to do all of the things that it needs to do, it doesn't necessarily need to make more money on top of that in order to be relevant. It just needs to be able to have cash coming in and cash going out enough.
Yeah, for a certain period of time.
For a certain period of time.
But eventually you have to be profitable. Yeah. The reason why we say profit is not really a key to business performance, or rather
a key business metric
is because in the net profit there's also expenses that you've incurred that you haven't really paid for.
Yes.
So if your supplier brought you goods worth 50,000, and you haven't paid for that, you're still going to note it down as an expense.
Yes.
And so it's going to reduce your profitability amount, but you haven't really paid out this money. So if after deducting all this, let's say unpaid expenses, the money that you have in your account should be enough to pay the supplier when he comes knocking. If you don't have that money to pay
that's where now your cash flow starts struggling.
That's where things start to grind to a halt, because the supplier won't give you more goods.
No.
Yeah.
And then now, if you don't get those more goods, you won't be able to continue production.
Exactly. And so you can actually have reported a profit of 100,000.
Yeah.
But you haven't been paid because you reported your revenues, but people owe you.
Yes.
Because they're your debtors.
Yes.
And when this supplier that gave you goods on credit comes knocking, and you don't have that cash, that's when
it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Okay. And maybe as we wrap, what are the signs for you that an enterprise is heading for success? And then also, what are the signs that they might need to kind of come back and re-strategize? So in a sense, what are enterprise green flags and what are enterprise red flags?
Okay. For me, an enterprise green flag is an enterprise that knows where it's going. So both in terms of governance, it knows how it's going to govern itself for the next 10 years, or at least they have a plan. It's a company or an enterprise that knows its financial projections for the next 5 to 10 years. It's a company that knows the environment in which it operates in, both the internal environment, what are its threats, what are its weaknesses, and external environment, what are the strengths, what are the opportunities, what kind of market size is there for them, how much of the market size have they claimed, what opportunity lies beyond their borders. So for me, a successful entrepreneur or a successful enterprise, one that has already sort of, and I divide this into into 4, which is governance, has already figured out its governance for the next at least 5-year period, has already figured out its financial forecast. It has already figured out its operations, and operations is divided into 2. It's figured out its environment, its internal and external environment, which are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats that it faces, and then it's figured out its operational day-to-day activities. Yeah. So who are its customers? How do they reach their customers? What do their customer journey look like, journey mapping? What's their value proposition? What's their distribution channels? So this is a company that can give you their business canvas model, or rather they have it even like stuck on their walls, or it's in the entrepreneur's head, and as well it's aware of its operational environment, finances and governance. Yeah. And then business red flags would be the ones that are not sure what the environment is, what their operational, sometimes maybe their operational activities change. They distribute through a courier today, The next day they distribute through, or maybe they've not even mapped out who their distribution channels are. Are they other retailers? Are they couriers? They haven't mapped that out. So if they have gaps in their business canvas, they haven't really understood their cost structures, their pricing, their value proposition, their customer journey. Those are red flags, because then they are not, the operations bit of the business is not as efficient. And then if they are not aware of their environment, also they'll not operate efficiently. If they're not aware of their finances and their projections of their finances, again, that's a red flag. And if they haven't figured out their governance, so you find sometimes for creative entrepreneurs, they just run their business themselves. They're the only key person. Yeah. And that poses a lot of key man risk. So even as a financier, if you see a business that's just one person, it's a bit, it's scary to put all your money or put a significant amount of money in it. But if you see a business that has a team structure, that they don't have to be permanent. Yeah. They could be temporary part-time workers, but there's a structure that exists beyond this one person. So that if this person is sick, business is still going on, still ongoing. Yeah. If this person is away, business is still ongoing. Yeah.
Okay. Kendi, I feel like this conversation has made me realize that business education should be a compulsory subject
in primary and high school,
like non-stop. You don't stop learning business education. And I feel like even a lot of people, and I remember, I think business education starting to learn it maybe around standard 6 or 6th grade, but it can even be started earlier, so that people can just start having a very basic understanding of this is how money moves, not just like your math sums with you are sent to the shop to buy 6 oranges, but what is happening in the shop. You know, when you go to buy your 6 oranges at 3 shillings each, you know, like it can be a lot deeper than it is, because it's so necessary.
It is.
Because even I think even if you're not necessarily going to go and run a business, you might decide that you want to support a business with your money, and so would supporting businesses and becoming an investor be something interesting for you. When you're dealing with small businesses, you start to understand some of their issues, so that then you're not expecting, you know, that kind of Carrefour perfection from your neighbors kiosk or whatever, like whatever it is, or even expecting the kind of attention that you'd get from your neighbor's kiosk from Carrefour, because that's not how it works. You know. And then of course, if you're going to probably run a business of some kind, whether you're going to be selling a good, whether you're selling your own personal services, all of these things are so important to know.
And maybe also just for businesses to have an aspiration. What do they aspire to be in 10 years? So even that kiosk, if it aspires, I don't think the entrepreneur should be aspiring to still be a kiosk in 10 years.
Or maybe they could,
unless they have like many chains of that kiosk, you know. There has to be a growth strategy.
I see.
Because without growth, you die. So,
I mean, I think maybe that's where I would wonder, because there's a whole kind of, and you can really tell from the way people are talking now, like I want to have an empire, and I'm like, you know, is an empire like a legitimate growth plan for everyone? There's some people who the kind of macro growth plan is really what's going to work for them, and then there are others who may not necessarily grow that big, but then what does growth mean to you?
But you can't remain as a kiosk for
You can. Why can't you remain as a kiosk if you're just a very happy kiosk? You're just very happy. Like some of those.
What are you doing with your retained earnings? So maybe you're expanding you're buying your own personal assets. Let's say you're building a house.
You're paying yourself better.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like those kiosks that have been in our neighborhoods for 18 years. And then the person tells you,
but I
took my kids to university.
Yeah, okay.
That's
I say that. Yeah, it's like a diversification where you take the money out of the business, but then you're doing a lot of personal things and investments.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like actually, that's interesting, because then, and I think I've had this conversation with some people about, is education an investment?
It is.
Or is it an expense?
It's an investment because it's supposed to earn you.
It's supposed to. What if it doesn't?
Oh man. It's a failed investment.
It's difficult. But yeah, Kendi, thank you so much for this incredible conversation, and for teaching us more and more about money every day.
Thank you so much, Njoki, for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Asante sana.
Thank you.
Have a lovely day.
You too.